Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds. I'm Dr. Ramsha Mushtaq Khan, and today I have the opportunity to present on the topic Water Quality, Criteria and Standards and Hardness of Water, under kind supervision of Professor Dr. Saira Afzal. Quote of the day, if you can be anything, be real. Content outline. Today's presentation will discuss definition of water quality standards, overview of WHO water quality guidelines, definition of hardness of water and special treatments, recent advances, and multiple choice questions. At the end of this presentation, the participants will be able to define water quality and its importance for public health and sustainable water resource management, describe the types of water quality standards, the factors considered in these guidelines, and the WHO water quality guidelines. Explain the concept of water hardness, its sources, effects, and methods for controlling it, and recognize the global recent advances in the context. The formulation of specific standards by World Health Organization in order to provide a basis for judging the quality of water. These standards are exposure limits for bacteriological, viral, chemical, and physical agents and have been adopted by governments or appropriate authorities and therefore have legal force. The purpose of standards is to minimize all the known health hazards, since it is obviously impossible to prevent all water pollution. Role of WHO water quality guidelines. The WHO guidelines for drinking water quality are intended for use by countries as a basis for the development of standards which, if properly implemented, will ensure the safety of drinking water supplies. The guidelines for drinking water quality recommended by WHO in 2011 relate to the following variables. Number 1, acceptability aspects. Number 2, microbiological aspects. Number 3, chemical aspects. And number 4, radiological aspects. Acceptability aspects. Acceptability aspects include physical parameters. The acceptability of drinking water can be influenced by the following constituents. Number 1, turbidity. Number 2, color. Number 3, taste and odor. And number 4, temperature. Turbidity. On aesthetic grounds, drinking water should be free from turbidity. Turbidity interferes with disinfection and microbiological determination. Water with turbidity of more than 4 NTU is usually noticeable to the naked eye. Color. Drinking water should be free from color, which may be due to the presence of colored organic matter, metals such as iron and manganese, or highly colored industrial waste. The guideline value is up to 15 true color units. Taste and odor. Taste and odor originate from natural and biological sources or processes. It is indicative of some form of pollution or malfunction during water treatment or distribution. No health-based guideline value is proposed for taste and odor. Temperature. Cool water is generally more palatable. Low water temperature tends to decrease the efficiency of the treatment process and may thus have a deleterious effect on drinking water quality. However, high water temperature enhances the growth of microorganisms. Inorganic constituents. Number 1 is chlorides. Since the chloride content of water varies from place to place, it is necessary to determine the normal range of chlorides of the unpolluted surface and groundwater in the given locality. Any excess over the normal range should arouse suspicion of water contamination. The standard prescribed for chloride is 200 milligrams per liter. The maximum permissible level is 600 milligrams per liter. Hardness. Public acceptability of the degree of hardness may vary considerably from one community to another depending on local conditions. In some instances, water hardness in excess of 500 milligrams per liter is tolerated by consumers. Ammonia. Natural levels of ammonia in ground and surface waters are usually below 0.2 milligrams per liter. Anaerobic groundwaters may contain up to 3 milligrams per liter. Ammonia in water is an indicator of possible bacterial, sewage, and animal pollution. It can compromise disinfection efficiency, resulting in nitrite formation in the distribution systems, and can cause the failure of filters for the removal of manganese and cause taste and odor problems. pH. pH levels of less than 7 may cause severe corrosion of metals in the distribution pipes, and elevated levels of certain chemical substances such as lead may result. At pH level above 8, there is a progressive decrease in the efficiency of the chlorine disinfection process. An acceptable pH drinking water is between 6.5 and 8.5. Hydrogen sulfide. The taste and odor threshold of hydrogen sulfide in water are estimated to be between 0.05 and 0.1 milligrams per liter. The rotten eggs odor of hydrogen sulfide is particularly noticeable in some groundwaters and in stagnant drinking water. Iron. On exposure to the atmosphere, the ferrous iron oxides to ferrous iron, giving an objectionable reddish-brown color to the water. At level above 0.3 milligrams per liter, iron stains laundry and plumbing fixtures. Sodium. The taste threshold concentration of sodium in water depends on the associated anion and the temperature of the solution. At room temperature, the average taste threshold for sodium is about 200 milligrams per liter. Sulfate. The presence of sulfate in drinking water can cause a noticeable taste. It is generally considered that taste impairment is minimal at levels below 250 milligrams per liter. Total dissolved solids. The palatability of water with a TDS level of less than 600 milligrams per liter is generally considered to be good. Drinking water becomes increasingly unpalatable at TDS levels greater than 1200 milligrams per liter. The concentrations of TDS below 1000 milligrams per liter is usually acceptable to the consumers. Zinc. Zinc imparts an undesirable astringent taste to water. Tests indicate a taste threshold concentration of 4 milligrams per liter as zinc sulfate. Drinking water seldom contains zinc at concentrations above 0.1 milligrams per liter. Manganese. Manganese concentrations below 0.1 milligrams per liter are usually acceptable to consumers. This may vary with local circumstances. At levels above 0.1 milligrams per liter, it stains sanitary ware and laundry and causes an undesirable taste in beverages. Dissolved oxygen. Depletion of dissolved oxygen in water supplies can encourage the microbial reduction of nitrate to nitrite and sulfate to sulfide, giving rise to the odor problem. No health-based guideline value has been recommended. Copper. The presence of copper in a water supply may interfere with the intended domestic uses of water. It increases the corrosion of galvanized iron and steel fittings. Staining of laundry and sanitary ware occurs at copper concentrations above 1 milligrams per liter. Aluminium. The presence of aluminium at concentrations in excess of 0.2 milligrams per liter often leads to the deposition of aluminium hydroxide fluid in the distribution system and the exacerbation of discoloration of water by iron. This table shows the substances and parameters in drinking water that may give rise to complaints from consumers. The physical parameters, color, taste and odor, temperature and turbidity, and inorganic constituents, including aluminium, ammonia, chloride, copper, hardness, hydrogen sulfide, iron, manganese, dissolved oxygen, pH, sodium, sulfate, total dissolved solids, and zinc. Microbiological aspects. But bacteriological indicators. Ideally, drinking water should not contain any microorganisms known to be pathogenic. It should be free from bacteria, indicative of pollution with excreta. Failure to provide adequate protection, effective treatment, and disinfection of drinking water will expose the community to the risk of outbreaks of intestinal and other infectious diseases. The potential consequences of microbial contamination are such that its control must always be of paramount importance and must never be compromised. The primary bacterial indicator recommended for this purpose is the coliform group of organisms as a whole, and the supplementary indicator organisms are the fecal streptococci and sulfite-reducing Clostridium. Coliform group includes both fecal and non-fecal organisms. A typical example of fecal group is E. coli and of non-fecal group is Klebsiella. From a practical point of view, it is assumed that all coliforms are of fecal origin unless a non-fecal origin can be proved. There are several reasons why coliform organisms are chosen as indicators of fecal pollution rather than waterborne pathogens directly. Coliform organisms are constantly present in great abundance in the human intestine. These organisms are foreign to potable waters and hence their presence in water is looked upon as evidence of fecal contamination. They are easily detected by culture methods as small as 1 bacteria in 100 ml of water. They survive longer than the pathogens. The coliform bacilli have greater resistance to the forces of natural purification than the waterborne pathogens. Fecal streptococci regularly occur in feces, but in much smaller numbers than E. coli. In doubtful cases, the finding of fecal streptococci in water is regarded as important confirmatory evidence of recent fecal pollution of water. Clostridium, the presence of spores of Clostridia in natural water suggests that fecal contamination has occurred, and their presence in the absence of the coliform group suggests that fecal contamination occurred at some remote time. Biological aspects, it is recommended that to be acceptable, drinking water should be free from any virus infections for man. Disinfection with 0.5 milligrams per liter of free chlorine residual after a contact period of at least 30 minutes at a pH of 8 is sufficient to inactivate the endemic viral load. For other areas, 0.2 milligrams per liter of free residual chlorine for half an hour should be insisted. The turbidity condition of 1 NTU or less must be fulfilled prior to disinfection of water if adequate treatment is to be achieved. Ozone has been shown to be an effective viral disinfectant if residuals of 0.2 to 0.4 milligrams per liter are maintained for 4 minutes. Biological aspects, the biological organisms known to have been transmitted by the ingestion of contaminated drinking water include protozoa, helminthes, and other free-living organisms. Protozoa include Entamoeba histolytica, Giardia species, and Balantidium coli. Rapid or slow sand filter has been shown to be effective in removing a high proportion of pathogenic protozoa. Helminthes include roundworms, flatworms, tranquillosis, and schistosoma, and represent primary hazards of unpiped water supplies. Source protection is the best approach to prevention. Free-living organisms include fungi and algae. The most common problem with these is their interference in the operation of water treatment process, color, turbidity, taste, and odor of finished water. Chemical aspects. There are few chemical constituents of water that can lead to acute health problems except through massive accidental contamination of a supply. Of particular concern are contaminants that have cumulative toxic properties such as heavy metals and substances that are carcinogenic. The presence of certain chemicals in excess of prescribed limits may constitute grounds for rejection of the water as a source of public water supply. These substances may be inorganic or organic. The inorganic constituents include arsenic. The average daily intake of inorganic arsenic in water is estimated to be similar to that from food. A provisional guideline value for arsenic in drinking water of 0.01 milligrams per liter is established. Cadmium, absorption of cadmium compound is dependent on the solubility of the compound. Cadmium accumulates primarily in the kidneys and has a long biological half-life of 10 to 35 years. A guideline value for cadmium is established at 0.3 micrograms per liter. The absorption of chromium. The absorption of chromium after oral exposure is relatively low and depends on the oxidation state. The guideline value for chromium is 0.05 milligrams per liter, which is considered to be unlikely to give significant health risks. Cyanide. The acute toxicity of cyanide is high. Effects on the thyroid and particularly the nervous system were observed in some populations as a consequence of the long-term consumption of inadequately processed cassava containing high levels of cyanide. Fluoride. High levels of fluoride, above 5 milligrams per liter, have been found in several countries. Such high levels at times lead to dental or skeletal fluorosis. The guideline value suggested is 1.5 milligrams per liter. Lead. Placental transfer of lead occurs in humans as early as the 12th week of gestation and continues throughout development. Young children absorb 4 to 5 times as much lead as adults, and the biological half-life may be considerably longer in children than in adults. Lead is a general toxicant that accumulates in the skeleton. Infants, children, and pregnant women are most susceptible to its adverse health effects. Lead also interferes with calcium metabolism both directly and by interfering with vitamin D metabolism. Mercury. The kidney is the main target organ for inorganic mercury, whereas methyl mercury affects mainly the central nervous system. The guideline value for total mercury is 0.006 milligrams per liter. Nitrate. The guideline value for nitrate in drinking water is solely to prevent methemoglobinemia, which depends on the conversion of nitrate to nitrite. Bottle infants of less than 3 months of age are most susceptible. Selenium. Most selenium compounds are water soluble. In humans, the toxicity of long-term exposure are manifested in nails, hair, and liver. This table shows the guideline values for health-related organic constituents, including chlorinated alkanes, chlorinated ethenes, and aromatic hydrocarbons. Radiological aspects. The effects of radiation exposure are classified as somatic if they manifest in the exposed individual and hereditary if they affect in the descendants. Stochastic effects, the probability of the occurring of a somatic effect rather than its severity is regarded as a function of the dose without a threshold, for instance, carcinogenesis. And non-stochastic effects, the severity of the effect varies with the dose. A threshold may therefore exist for such somatic effects. The aim of radiation protection is to prevent harmful non-stochastic effects and to reduce the probability of stochastic effects to a level of deemed acceptable. Radioactivity in drinking water should not only be kept within safe limits, but also within those limits to be kept as low as is reasonably possible. The guidelines value recommended taking account of both naturally occurring radioactivity and any radioactivity that may reach the water source as a result of man's activities. The proposed guideline values are gross alpha activity 0.5 BQIL and gross beta activity 1.0 BQIL. Hardness of water, the soap destroying power of water. The consumer considers water to be hard if large amounts of soap are required to produce leather. The hardness in water is caused mainly by 4 dissolved compounds. Number 1, calcium bicarbonate. Number 2, magnesium bicarbonate. Number 3, calcium sulfate. And number 4, magnesium sulfate. The presence of any of these compounds produce hardness. Explanation is hardness is classified as carbonate, temporary, or non-carbonate permanent hardness. The carbonate hardness, which was formerly designated as temporary hardness, is due to the presence of calcium and magnesium bicarbonates. And the non-carbonate hardness, formerly designated as permanent hardness, is due to the calcium and magnesium sulfates, chlorides, and nitrates. This is the classification of hardness in water: soft water, moderately hard, hard water, and very hard water. Disadvantages of hard water. Number 1, it destroys soap. Hardness in water consumes more soap and detergents. When heated, the carbonates are precipitated and bring about furring or scaling of the boilers, and adversely affects cooking. Cooked food in soft water retains its natural color and appearance. Special treatments. Number 1 is removal of hardness. Number 2 is fluoridation, and number 3 is defluoridation. The methods for removal of hardness, and for temporary hardness, number 1 is boiling, number 2, addition of lime, number 3, addition of sodium carbonate, and number 4, permuted process. And for permanent hardness, number 1 is addition of sodium carbonate, and number 2 is the base exchange process. Water hardness and cardiovascular disease. Reports from several countries have shown an inverse statistical association between the hardness of drinking water and the death rate from cardiovascular diseases. Areas supplied with soft drinking water showed a significantly higher prevalence of either arteriosclerotic heart disease, degenerative heart disease, hypertension, certain deaths of cardiovascular origin, or a combination of these. The evidence is based solely on circumstantial evidence and statistical association. Further studies are in progress to establish a possible connection between certain water characteristics and the development of cardiovascular diseases. Recent updates. Published in March 2022, this is the WHO Guideline for Drinking Water Quality, 4th edition, incorporating the first and second addenda. The WHO Guidelines for Drinking Water Quality provides an authoritative basis for the setting of national regulations and standards for water safety in support of public health. The key recommendation in the guideline remains a framework for safe drinking water encompassing complementary functions of national regulators, water suppliers, and independent surveillance agencies. The framework comprises of number one, development of drinking water quality regulations and standards, including health-based targets. Number two, water safety plans, a proactive risk management approach encompassing all steps in the water supply to ensure the consistent delivery of a safe and acceptable drinking water supply. And number three, independent surveillance agencies to ensure water safety plans are effective and that health-based targets are met. This figure shows the interrelationship among the individual chapters of the guidelines for drinking water quality in ensuring drinking water safety. The key updates of the guideline include Chapter 5, Surveillance, which is updated based on the second edition of Domestic Water Quantity, Service Level and Health. Chapter 6, Applications of the Guidelines in Specific Circumstances, new section on portable reuse guidance for producing safe drinking water. Chemical Aspects, Chapter 8, 12 and annexes, new or updated chemical fact sheets for 14 chemicals in Chapter 12 based on the chemical background documents. This is the list of 14 chemicals that is included in the guideline. Chapter 9, Radiological Aspects, which is updated to reflect the management of radioactivity in drinking water. And Chapter 11, Microbial Fact Sheets, which is updated fact sheet on cyanobacteria based on the second edition of Toxic Cyanobacteria in Water. Now it is the time for MCQs. Number one, a community in an urban city XYZ is concerned about excessive scaling in the water pipes and household appliances for the past 1 year. To resolve the consumer complaint, the water testing laboratory permits water with a total dissolved solids below concentrations of A 500, B 1000, C 1500, D 2000, and E 2500. Anyone?
A.
E. No, the answer is B, 1000 milligrams per liter. In a rural district XYZ, intensive rearing of farm animals gave rise to much higher levels of ammonia, which in turn compromised the disinfection efficiency of its water distribution system. This will now lead to a subsequent rise in an inorganic constituent named as A, iron, B, sodium, C, copper, D, manganese, and E, aluminium.
E.
E. No,
D.
D, manganese. In a village XYZ, several children have fallen ill recently. The investigation has traced a source of contamination via a nearby animal farm where waste from the animals has entered the water source. An important confirmatory evidence of recent fecal pollution can be the presence of A. E. coli, B. Klebsiella, C. Streptococci, D. Clostridium coliform. Yes, the answer is C. C. The answer is C. Streptococci. In the same village XYZ, further investigation reveals the presence of spores of Clostridium in the natural waters of the vicinity. The presence of these spores in the absence of coliform group suggests that fecal contamination has occurred. A. Recently, B. Remotely, C. 1 month ago, D. 1 year ago, and E. 10 years ago.
C.
Yes, the answer is B. Remotely. Recently, several cases of hepatitis A have emerged in a rural town. Upon exploration, it was discovered that the source of the outbreak was the drinking water supply. The district health authority urged disinfection of all water supplies in the area suspected of hepatitis virus endemicity with a free residual chlorine for a contact period of at least A 15 minutes, B 30 minutes, C 45 minutes, D 60 minutes, and E 75 minutes.
75 minutes.
No, the answer is B 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Yes. Sorry. Residents of a remote flooded area rely on a well water, streams, and other surface water sources for their daily water needs. A huge number of children and adults experience symptoms of water-related diseases. The organism most commonly associated with producing disease in areas of unpiped water supply includes A. Antamoeba, B. Giardia, C. Balantidium, C. D. Schistosoma, and E. helminthes?
A. Amoeba.
No, this is the key is the unpiped water supply. This is the hint in the MCQ. Unpiped water supply is associated with schistosoma. A small town located near a former nuclear power plant has recently discovered high levels of radioactive contamination in its drinking water. The residents of the town have started to show alarmingly high rates of cancer and other radiation-related illnesses. In terms of radioactivity, the probability of an effect occurring rather than its severity is called as A. Somatic, B. Non-somatic, C. Stochastic, D. Non-stochastic, and E. Carcinogenesis.
C.
The answer is C. Stochastic. A suburban neighborhood has recently noticed the water coming from the taps has become increasingly hard, causing a buildup of soap scum in their showers and latrines. The hardness of the water is due to high levels of calcium and magnesium bicarbonates present in the water source. The method not appropriate to remove this type of hardness is A. Boiling, B. Addition of lime, C. Addition of carbonate, D. Permuted process, and E. Base exchange.
A.
No, the answer is E. Base exchange because this is the method for permanent hardness, and the scenario puts the example of temporary hardness. The WHO guidelines for drinking water quality provide an authoritative basis for the setting of national regulations and standards for water safety in support of public health. The key recommendation in the guidelines remains a framework for safe drinking water. One of the following not a complementary function of the framework is A. Health-based targets, B. Water safety plans, C. Independent surveillance agencies, D. National regulators, and E. Guideline or portable reuse.
C.
The answer is E. Guideline on portable.
C.
In a small community, a 2 months-old bottle-fed infant has been diagnosed with methemoglobinemia, a rare blood disorder that reduces the ability of red blood cells to carry oxygen. The investigation reveals that the source of the illness is linked to the high levels of an inorganic constituent in the drinking water supply, which is primarily sourced from a nearby agricultural area. The suspected substance can be A. Mercury, B. Lead, C. Cyanide, D. Nitrate, and E. Fluoride.
Charlie?
The answer is D. Nitrate. So this is the key of the MCQs. Please like, share, and subscribe our YouTube channel, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amsha. Very important topic and very informative presentation. One thing that I want to add is about, as you have already presented, about the addition of chlorine and chloramine for water disinfection. So the most important point is that how much amount should be added to purify water. And it is 1 part of the chlorine solution to each 100 parts of water, or in other words, 1 pint or 16 ounces of the chlorine solution to about 12.5 gallons of water. And this is so good for killing parasites, bacteria, as well as viruses. As you have already presented about different parasites and bacteria, one thing that I want to emphasize is that even the viruses, they can be eliminated by the process of chlorination if it is done in proper amount. And this process is frequently used to achieve safe levels of chlorine in the drinking water. As we know that chlorine is one of the agent that has been used for disinfection in many lakes, wells, as well as sources of water. And in a flood affected area, the chlorine tablets have been found very effective. And usually we face the shortage of chlorine tablets because it is so readily used, and it helps in many communities. And the travelers who are traveling for miles, they are having these type of remedies that are very important to kill the germs, especially like salmonella, campylobacter, and norovirus. So it is one of a very effective way of disinfection. So this is one of my input in this presentation, and we are very much concerned about our public water systems and how the different regulatory authorities, they are checking the standards that must match the WHO guidelines for standards of drinking water and quality checks. Thank you very much, everyone, and Allah Hafiz.
Allah
Allah
Hafiz.
Hafiz, ma'am.